Hi, this is Barry Fitzgerald, and I'll see you in the shadows.
Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Welcome to the Monday night here on the Shadows Radio. I'm Rebecca, and wait for it.
I'm Cara.
Holy crap!
The aliens let me back.
Just temporarily, though. I have to send you home, apparently.
They didn't want to do any more experiments.
Do you have any brain cells left?
The probe is broken. That's all I can say.
I hope they took it out before it broke.
I can't say any more, or they'll take me back.
If we hear like a buzzing sound, is that the little charge going off? Like,
all I can think of is when I say the word probe, all I think of is Cartman on that episode of South Park, and now I can't stop laughing.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
yeah,
I'm here.
Slightly rusty.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little clunky.
Clunk.
But mostly alien free.
Mostly.
I don't notice any antennae. Or no green hue to your skin.
Oh.
You got some sparkles on your pants, but I think that's because my kid gave you a hug.
I don't have any chocolate sauce on me either, so I'm good.
You might want to check your pants when you get home, because that chocolate sauce was flying.
Anyway.
We had quite a party.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, see, that's what happens when I return. I get glittered and chocolate sauced.
See, that's why you need to come more often. Stop banging the microphone on the table.
Oh, sorry.
Kara's new to the studio.
I'm new to the mic. Usually I have my headset, and I'm not used to having a mic in front of me.
Okay,
and
so microphone, and it's big-ass heavy stand.
I want to play with it and stuff.
But play with that one. That one's not plugged in.
But that's not as fun.
It's on the same big-ass heavy stand.
Oh, my God.
It's just not connected to the one that's going to echo through
this is not visual, so people are probably just tuning out right now.
They're probably all dead from shock from hearing you.
It's not that big of a deal. The aliens took me.
They went return to sender.
They said, all right, we're done with you, and shot me back.
For now, anyway. All right, so let's get all the boring housekeeping stuff out of the way. So if you want to catch this and any of all of our podcasts, you can go to theshadowsradio.com and now click on the right-hand rail where all of our podcasts are available. Everyone say, ooh, new website design. I know. Well, what happens when your website blows up and you have to start from scratch? So, there's that.
She tried to explain that to me, and I think my head fell off.
So, so go to theshadowsradio.com, click on the right-hand rail now, and you can find all of your major podcasting services where you can find us this day and every day and take us into your regular life. Pre-Alien Cara and post-Alien, I don't know what you want to call the last couple months of our show. Post-Cara disappearance confusion. Yeah, there's that. So feel free to do that while you're...
Hey, I could have been in an insane asylum. You don't know.
Well, I was trying to be nice. I told everyone aliens because I figured telling everyone that you were committed was not always the best plan.
Although being committed to an insane asylum would be a vacation. But anyway.
It depends which one, because we've been to a couple haunted ones that I hear horror stories about. I don't know if I would consider, electroshock therapy and like ice bath therapy as a vacation.
I don't know. I've never tried it. I'll try it and then I'll let you know.
Dude, I can fill my tub with ice cubes and just dump you in there. We can do it on air just as a test.
Forget it. I'll go with the aliens. At least it was sunny there.
I have a cooler in the back of the studio. I can just put ice in that and just stick your head in and just go for like a temporary thing. Or you know that thing you used to do it like at like sleepovers where you do the hot water in one hand and the cold water in the other hand. You try and make them pee.
Oh, great! Now I got to pee.
Dude, I'm not stopping the recording again.
Just kidding.
Oh, yeah, light as a feather, stiff as a board. Yes, and then I went to Catholic school, so whenever you did that, everyone's parents always assumed you were like into like demonic hauntings and, Satan worship.
I went to Catholic school too. It was the same thing. It was like, don't you do that. That's the devil.
Don't do that in my house. Are you calling the devil? We also did Bloody Mary. That was the other one that used to get us in trouble. And we'd try to do makeshift Ouija boards because no one owned a Ouija board.
Oh, yeah.
So we would try and like cut out the little paper squares and like slide our hands around. It never worked because obviously you were on carpet or something, like in somebody's like den in their basement. It was the devil. So speaking of the devil, that is not our topic tonight.
Oh, darn it.
No, we're going to travel. We're going to go on vacation, actually.
See, this is a good topic.
How do you feel about a tropical island that is so technologically advanced that it is centuries beyond everything on the mainland, that has a navy power that is unrivaled by anyone else in the known world?
This place doesn't exist.
It possibly does. It is actually a utopia of religious tolerance, political calmness.
Get out.
A beacon in the water for travelers where everyone from all walks of life can bring their goods and get fair trade.
This does not exist. You're lying.
But does that sound like the perfect vacation?
It does. Well, first of all, everybody would want to stay there.
Yes.
Because, everybody wants to jump ship now. But it'd be great for a vacation, but then everybody would want to stay there.
Well, you too can own a timeshare on the beautiful island of Atlantis, somewhere deep at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, Jesus.
Yes, no, that is actually the description of the island of Atlantis, and the kind of thing. But that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the island world of Atlantis. Aren't you excited?
I don't know much about Atlantis, so this will be...
You're going to learn a thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to learn.
I feel like that's most of our topics. You learn a thing.
Well, I do, but there's some things that I just never...
I meant you, like in general, like the world learns.
Yes, but I'm saying for myself, it was never something that I explored or even thought about.
You were not a deep sea diver?
No, I don't. I'm like, sharks are in the ocean. That's where they live. I'm going to stay out of it.
Maybe that's what happened to the people of Atlantis. They turned into sharks and they're just pissed that they're underwater now. So they're like, want to eat things.
Maybe. Who knows? But I never explored that part because the sea is so unknown. It scares the bejesus out of me.
Well, for the fun topic that we got tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about where the idea of Atlantis came from. Talk about some of the historical, is Atlantis plausible? Is that a real place? And then finally, some of the actual historical sites in the world that people have claimed were either the inspiration for or the island of Atlantis. So it'll be fun.
But if that's... Okay, go ahead.
What? No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if it's the bottom of the ocean...
Well, that's one story.
No, that's
but there are many, many stories.
I never knew.
See, if you had read through the notes that I didn't give you, that I suddenly realized I did not share.
No, it's not even your fault because I'm having computer issues. Big time. So
the aliens ate it?
Yeah.
The aliens ate your homework? Oh, those jerks.
That's my new book. That's the title of my new book.
I feel like that's already a book. I feel like that was a book when I was in like middle school. It was like one of those like stupid like middle school readers.
Oh, it was like, I'll have to come up with something better.
It was like, Super Fudge and the alien ate my homework or something like that. I don't know.
There probably is a book with that.
All right, we're stalling. Okay. So, Atlantis as an island was first mentioned in Plato's Timaeus and Critias. I'm going to butcher all these names. I'm just warning you all now. I didn't look up any of them.
I'll even butcher them worse.
So Atlantis was an ancient naval power that besieged ancient Athens. In the story, Athens repels the invasion, and it's the first loss in the history of Atlantis' navy, which causes it to fall out of favor with the gods. In retaliation for the loss, the island is sunk into the sea and wiped from all the world maps. So that's kind of the idea of like how Atlantis sunk into the ocean, is that it lost to Athens, and the gods were like, hey, screw you, smush.
That was nice of them.
Well, they're not very forgiving all the time. There's sometimes the gods are like super forgiving and they're like, let's do all the things. And then there's times when they turn people into spiders for being prettier than them. So depending on who wrote...
There was no rhyme or reason to anything.
No, you never heard that one? I think it was,
Okay, I failed mythology.
Okay.
That's the fun fact for me, is I failed mythology.
Look at the surprise on my face.
I know. She's shocked.
I kind of am, actually.
Her jaw's on the floor.
So, scholars call this Plato's allegory of Atlantis. However, some people have actually tried to say that it's a real place. So Atlantis is an example. So the allegory version says that Atlantis is the example of the hubris of the nations of the world. Ancient Athens was the, quote, perfect state of a republic. It was like the prime example of what everybody should strive to be. The undefeated navy showed that the nations of the world at the time were able to be beaten by a country that followed the ideal of a government of a republic. So Plato is trying to push his idea of the republic. He's saying Athens is the perfect republic. Look, your undefeatable navy just got squashed by my Athenians.
Gotcha.
So that's his. Like me explaining this like I actually understand it.
You're making sense to me.
So in his body of work, the actual island of Atlantis is a fairly minor mention, but it carried over into a lot of utopian writers of the Renaissance, Thomas More, Francis Bacon, etc. A lot of them kind of grabbed the name. What? I said Bacon. You got excited?
Yeah, I was like, that must be a relative of Kevin Bacon.
Everyone is related to Kevin Bacon somehow, right? Isn't that the thing? Is it what's it, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
So during the 19th century, scholars mistranslated Plato's work and listed the story of Atlantis among his historical records rather than his allegories. So he wrote the idea of Atlantis as an allegory. However, when they kind of retranslated them in the 19th century, it got moved to the historical section, which then started the debate of whether or not Atlantis was a real place. He had only included vague details about the time of the events and the location of Atlantis. However, normally his historical traditions would be filled with a lot of identifying details, dates, times, figures, people, places, you know. So you're able to track down kind of the stories. So that's kind of the idea of people are saying, well, that's why it got mistranslated. Or that's their proof for the fact that they're saying it got mistranslated. So they're saying the argument is that it got mistranslated, it's actually an allegory. And some people are saying, oh, no, it's actually supposed to be a historical record. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're saying the difference is that, like, all the stuff that he wrote about actual events have dates and times and places and identifying features. This story doesn't. So the only thing really identifying about Atlantis that Plato actually wrote in his story was that it happened 9,000 years before he actually wrote it down, and that the island nation was quote, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. If you're not familiar, the Pillars of Hercules are supposedly the Straits of Gibraltar. At least to most people's interpretation. There are a couple other, and you'll see them when we start discussing where Atlantis could actually be. There are a couple other people that have suggested other things as the Pillars of Hercules. But generally, when you talk about the ancient world, the Pillars of Hercules means the Straits of Gibraltar.
Okay. So
there's another theory that says that Plato actually based his allegory off an ancient oral tradition that he heard in Egypt. Sometimes at that time, it was kind of common practice for a writer to take an oral history that they heard, manipulate it, reconfigure the story, and make it fit the lesson that they were trying to tell. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of the things right now, saying, like, well, possibly he heard the story of Atlantis in Egypt or Haliki, and just like Plato said, it was an island actually sunk into the sea, but then Plato grabbed it and ran with it, added the Atlantis battle, God smiting, all that kind of stuff.
God smiting.
The God smiting. Not the God smiting, the God's doing the smiting. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard to say exactly whether he thought he was writing down true events or whether he thought that he was just making up a story. But I'm going to read you some of it and you can tell me. What do you think? So in the Timaeus, this is the first primary source where Plato actually mentions Atlantis. He wrote the dialogue in 360 BC and claimed that he was quoting famous Athenian poet and lawmaker Solon, or Solon, depending on which version of the script you read, who visited Egypt in 590 and 580 BC, where he translated the Egyptian records of the story of Atlantis. So the Timaeus actually claims that Atlantis was a real place translated from an Egyptian record. In this dialogue, Socrates muses about the perfect society described in Plato's Republic, which was published in 380 BC, and wonders if he and his guests might recollect a story which exemplifies such a society. Critias mentions a tale that he considered to be historical that would make a perfect example, and he then follows by describing Atlantis as is recorded in the Critias. Critias. So there's a Critias person and a Critias dialogue. They're two different things, but they're both named the same thing.
I'll tell you, it sounds all fake to me, but go ahead.
No, it sounds all Greek to you.
That's it!
It's all Greek to me. No, sorry. In this account, ancient Athens seems to represent the, quote, perfect society, and Atlantis, its opponent, represents the very antithesis of the perfect traits described of a republic. Oops. So Don't scroll too far or you lose your quote. So here's the exact quote about Atlantis. You ready for this? For it is related in our records how once upon a time your state stayed the course of a mighty host, which starting from a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean was insolently advancing to attack the whole of Europe and Asia to boot. For the ocean there was at that time navigable. For in front of the mouth of which you Greeks call, as they say, the Pillars of Hercules, there lay an island which was larger than Libya and Asia together. And it was possible for the travelers of that time to cross from it to other islands, and from the islands to the whole of the continent over again, them which encompasses that veritable ocean. For all that we have here, lying within the mouth of which we speak, is evidently have a haven having a narrow entrance, but that yonder is a real ocean, and that the land surrounding it may most rightly be called, in its fullest and truest sense, a continent. Now, in this island of Atlantis, there existed a confederation of kings, a great and marvelous power, which held sway over all the island, and over many other islands also, and parts of the continent. End quote. So that's really it.
That's it?
That's what they mentioned about those are the details provided about the island of Atlantis. It was an island in the ocean. And you could travel the ocean, and you could get there. And people got there. And it was in the ocean. Past the Pillars of Atlantis.
Oh my gosh.
Now, in the Critias, he actually goes on with some more detail about the island. So in the second dialogue, Critias states that the Hellenic deities of old divided the land so that each deity had their own domain. Poseidon was given the island of Atlantis. The Egyptians described Atlantis as an island consisting mostly of mountains in the northern portion and along the shore, and encompassing a great plain in an oblong shape in the south, extending in one direction 3,000 stadia, which is about 555 kilometers or 345 miles. That's a pretty big island.
Mm-hmm.
But across the center inland, it was about 2,000 stadia, which is 370 kilometers or 230 miles. 50 stadia, 9 kilometers or 6 miles from the coast, was a mountain that was low on all sides, broke it off a roundabout, and the central island itself was 5 stadias in diameter, which is 0.57 miles. So it's kind of a bizarre shape. And a very large island. Like, it's a fairly big island. The tale goes that Poseidon fell in love with Cleido. I'm going to call her Cleo, because that's easier to say. Cleido, which is the daughter of Evenor and Leucippe, who bore him 5 pairs of male twins.
Oh, good Lord.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of twins.
The eldest of these twins, Atlas, was made the rightful king of the entire island and the ocean, called the Atlantic Ocean in his honor. So Atlas was given the island of Atlantis and the ocean, and he was given the mountain of his birth and the surrounding area as his fiefdom. I just like saying fiefdom. Atlas's twin, Darius, was given the extremities of the island towards the Pillars of Hercules. The other 4 pairs of twins, Amphiaraus, Avaemon, Menesis, and Autochthon. I'm just going to spell this one for you. It's Autochthon. Autochthon. Yeah, that guy.
We're going to call him Otto for short.
Yeah, Otto. Elasippus and Mestor, and Asis and Deioprepes were also given, quote, rule over many men and large territory, which is not so much specific, but at least we know that Atlas was given the island, the majority of the island, and the ocean. Poseidon carved the mountain where his love dwelt into a palace and enclosed it with 3 circular moats of increasing width, varying from 1 to 3 stadia. And just so you know, that's roughly 229 yards per stadia. So separated by rings of land proportional in size. The Atlanteans then built bridges northward from the mountain, making a route to the rest of the island. They dug a great canal to the sea, and along the bridges carved tunnels into the rings of rock so that ships could pass into the city along the mountain. They carved docks from the rock walls of the moat. Every passage of the city was guarded by gates and towers, and a wall surrounded each ring of the city. The walls were constructed of red, white, and black rock quarried from the moats, and they were covered in brass, tin, and precious metal oracleum, respectively. According to Critias, 9,000 years before his lifetime, a war took place between those outside the Pillars of Hercules at the Straits of Gibraltar and those who dwelt within them. The Atlanteans had conquered the parts of Libya within the Pillars as far as Egypt, and the European continent as far as Tyrrhenia, and had subjected his people to slavery. The Athenians, not the Atlanteans, the Athenians, led an alliance of resistors against the Atlantean Empire. Sounds like a Star Wars movie.
Does.
And as the alliance disintegrated, prevailed alone against the Empire, liberating the occupied lands. So here's a quote. But afterward, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there's a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island.
Somebody had a lot of imagination. But I mean, there's absolutely every possibility that Atlantis existed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty... So the first time they mentioned it's kind of like, oh, there's this island.
Mm-hmm.
And the second time they mentioned it, they gave a lot of detail, especially about the size of the island, a description of this. So one of the big things that people keep coming back to is the description of the palace with the concentric rings.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel like when you're talking about something that's basically like, think about when you drop a single like stone or something into the river and it kind of makes that like weird ripple pattern. That's what it looks like. So that something like that should be a fully identifiable feature.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the island sunk, those concentric rings should appear.
Right.
And people often say, well, look for an island that kind of looks like a volcanic island where it's got like that half ring.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, maybe that's the first place to start kind of thing. So it's interesting. I mean, you get a lot more detail, especially about the island itself. So
you're going through all the detail, and this is what I think. I think
that I did a lot of work.
No, you do a lot of work, but also what I think is, it's quite plausible that it existed because we've had people on the show before where they were showing us maps and how continents were different shapes.
Yep.
And, all this other kind of stuff. And that stuff I never even thought of. And because, underwater volcanoes happen and all this, he's explaining how all this stuff happened.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but he had like whole like aerial photos of the island of Africa.
I think I still have that stuff on my computer. And, so, I mean, it's quite plausible that it could have been there and, went on the ocean. And then I also think that this is the other way my brain works. Somebody could have just made up the whole thing. I mean, geez, so Pete's J.K. Rowling made up all Harry Potter world.
Yeah, but she said it in real life London, though.
I know. I'm just saying that, like, that's the way my brain thinks. Like, on one end, it's like, it's quite plausible. And then the other end, like, you go that imaginative part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it also is possible that there was a little island of Atlantis or there was a island of Atlantis somewhere. And it maybe didn't have these big grand things that are being described. But Plato grabbed onto that. Oh, I like this little island. This is really cute. Let me take this and base a story off it.
Absolutely.
Like just like you said with J.K. Rowling and London. Obviously there's no Diagon Alley and no leaky cauldron that you have to, flush yourself into the Ministry of Magic.
This is what, 300 BC? Yeah. I mean, he could have taken it and with what he had and made something of it because he was looking for that type of world. And it did disappear. I mean, that island could have, disappeared because things are constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. I never, ever contemplated Atlantis.
Are getting back together?
Well, I've never contemplated like Atlantis and the possibilities of something like that at all, ever.
Well, just for you, I got a whole bunch of possibilities to consider. But first we're going to talk about whether or not people thought that Atlantis was actually real.
Oh, I thought we were going on a field trip.
We are, later. Okay. So during ancient times, Plato's time, it was often written that Atlantis was fictional. Metaphorical, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Plato's students themselves believed that the story of the island was created solely to teach philosophy and philosophical methods. However, shortly after Plato's death, the students of his students, so we're talking about like now 2 generations removed from the original story, began claiming that the story of Atlantis was actually a historic record. Xenocrates, who has one of the best names.
He does.
Or Xenocrates.
Or like Socrates.
Yes. It's not Socrates, it's Socrates, which means it's a Xenocrates.
Well, wait a minute. Socrates. Oh, that was Bill and Ted. Okay, go ahead.
Socrates. Okay. He, for example, claimed to have traveled to Egypt and saw the hieroglyphs of the telling of Atlantis.
Right.
So that's kind of one example of somebody who was the teacher of a teacher who and saw hieroglyphs that actually depicted the story of Atlantis. Hellenistic Jewish philosopher Philo. I wonder if he has dough named after. lived and wrote in
I didn't even
Egypt.
go there.
He actually wrote about the destruction of Atlantis in the 1st century. So 1st century AD, which means that this is, 1,000 years after Plato. But he's writing about the destruction of Atlantis while living in Egypt. So it's kind of interesting that, somebody else of it. So did he read Plato's work and then decide to write down a historical record, or did he just write it on his own? I don't know. In the 4th century, a historian called Ammianus Marcellinus.
I think we need to get Bill and Ted's phone booth so we can go pick it up and find out.
Wrote that when the island of Atlantis was sinking, many of the inhabitants fled to Western Europe to be assimilated into the Gaul people. The Gauls have actually had a long oral tradition that many of their ancestors came from what they call a unique land that was in grave peril, and those ancestors fled with just the clothes on their back. So, that kind of plays into that story where it's like the stories of the blue-eyed Native Americans down in South Carolina.
Blue-eyed Native Americans in South Carolina.
When the colony of Roanoke was falling.
Oh, yes.
They assimilated themselves into the populations, and apparently, some people say that every once in a while a blue-eyed Native American pops up because they are part of that lineage.
Ooh.
Yeah. But anyway, most writers of the time placed the island either somewhere in the Mediterranean or right outside the sea in the Atlantic Ocean, right outside the Straits of Gibraltar. Some later Druid Gaul writing claimed that Atlantis was actually in the north around the British Isles. But I feel like in my head, that's too far north for Plato to be writing about.
Yeah.
Plato knew about the British Isles. He knew about that area. But I also think that a lot of the writing at that time was very Greek and Roman centric.
Yes.
They really didn't stray too far out into the rest of the world.
Well, because they weren't going to go very far. They thought that what they had was there.
Exactly. They were the center of the world, and that was it. Period.
Exactly.
At the end. Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. Center.
Center of the world. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh my gosh.
So there's also a legend that the Mayan people of Mexico are the remnants of the Atlantis people who fled the destruction of their own island.
Wow, we're reeling in the Mayans. Okay.
We are. That's why their calendar only goes so far, because they think it's going to explode again or something. I don't know. No, I'm making that up. Okay.
That's not real.
Also, the same thing's been said about the Aztecs, too. Because people are trying to grasp the reasons why these huge, amazing, technologically advanced civilizations popped up seemingly in the middle of nowhere. It's not like there were other advanced civilizations that they were pulling from. They literally were isolated by themselves in these jungles, and they were pulling us. So they're basically saying, oh, they were from Atlantis. Atlantis had, European influence. So I feel like that's where that comes from.
Right.
In the mid-19th century, it was said that the indigenous people did not have the technology on their own to build the elaborate structures that we see to make up their society. So they must have been influenced by outside cultures. See, I just said that. It's amazing how I knew my own notes.
She is unbelievable.
Okay, ready? This is for one of the best names in the whole wide world.
Oh, Jesus.
In 1880, Brasseur de Bourbourg.
I want that name. I think if I ever get famous and I check into a hotel,
you're going to be Brasseur de Bourbourg?
That's my name.
De Bourbourg. Yes. It's Brasseur de D.
Bourbourg.
Bourbourg. Bourbourg.
Bourbourg.
I am clearly not a French speaker. But he claimed to have translated a sacred Mayan book that said that the Mayan and the Aztecs descended from the Toltecs, which he claimed were the Atlanteans. I'm not entirely sure how we got there from there, but he did. He even went to show references in the translation that tied the Toltec Empire to the ancient European cultures in technology, culture, and even to Egypt in their appearances.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
So he even showed references in the translations. He's translating something. He could be making anything up.
That's the point.
So, we could oh my gosh. I just imagine.
Well, shockingly, however, later it is claimed that de Bourbourg fabricated a lot of his translation.
Hey, shocking.
By adding in details and crafting the story to fit his narrative rather than doing a straight word for word translation. Shocking how that just happened that you just said that.
Well, I'm just thinking of myself. Geez, we could translate anything and we could just make up our own stories and nobody would know.
There you go.
If you say you're an expert in something, I'm an expert in these translations, and I can translate for you and say what it says, and it could say "kiss my butt," and that's what I tell everybody, and it could say something like this whole thing. Oh my gosh! Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going off of trying to figure out how to translate "kiss my butt" into ancient Toltec.
That would be awesome.
Augustus Le Plongeon, also an Augustus Le Plongeon.
Oh.
Je suis Napoleon. No, sorry. Augustus Le Plongeon. I am totally respectful of these people, I swear. He claimed to have found connections to ancient Maya language and ancient Greek, but he has no academically credible sources and believed that his conclusions were nothing more than flight of fancy.
Okay, did anybody else think of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when she said Augustus, or was it just me?
It's just you.
That's all.
Augustus. Sorry. During World War II, the Nazis actually went looking for Atlantis, believing that the island contained a race of supermen who would help them win the war.
Oh, well,
Now, let me put it this way. If the island sank, they must have been super mermen because there had nobody left. What do you think? The island sank and left a big void in the ocean?
Look who was running the Nazis.
That's true. All right. Edgar Cayce often said that his reading subjects were reincarnated Atlanteans who were looking to get back home. You know who Edgar Cayce is? You're giving me a blank stare.
No, I know the name, and I'm totally just having a brain fart.
So he claimed he was able to recreate the Akashic record, giving a detailed description of the island based on their collective consciousness. He also claimed that Atlantis would rise in the 60s, and there was a hall of records under the Sphinx in Egypt that contained all the information about Atlantis.
All right, let's go dig it up.
So I would like to say that I actually did research this to see if anybody had done any kind of digging under the Sphinx. Many, many people have done digging under the Sphinx. No reason, not because of Edgar Cayce, just in general. There's nothing under the Sphinx besides dirt.
Darn it.
Sorry. There's a boat down there, though, apparently.
There's a boat?
There's a boat. Well, yeah, they had to get the people and the stuff there somehow.
True.
However, as we understand more and more about continental drift and plate tectonics, many scientists are starting to claim that losing a landmass of that size in recent history would be actually impossible. Just based on the way the Earth has been shifting, a giant island just doesn't sink. There has to be a reason that it sinks. And
pieces could fall off.
Where's it going to go? It's not like a Lego that gets lost under the couch.
Or you step on in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Why couldn't a piece of an island fall off and go in the ocean?
It could. We're talking about a 350-mile wide island. That's the size of Pennsylvania.
Okay, but if this was back in...
That would be like if Greenland suddenly just dropped off the map.
I know. If this was how many centuries ago?
But they're saying based on plate tectonics. So today's scientists...
Okay, I see
with the computers and the fancy degrees.
The fancy degrees and the degrees on the wall and the fancy computers told us.
They're saying that due to plate tectonics, an island just wouldn't just out of the ground. One might come up because of the way things are spreading, but... You wouldn't lose something because the way that they're spreading, there's nowhere for it to go.
It's like a Dr. Seuss cartoon. Whoop! This island just pops up.
It's not a pop-up book.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay.
Okay. So the Pillars of Hercules are, in fact, an actual location, and they're actually mentioned in many, many, many works of the time. They're often identified as the mountains on either side of the Gulf of Laconia, which is the southernmost gulf in Greece, which is the last waterway before Greece opened up to the Mediterranean Sea. However, a lot of people also call the Pillars of Hercules the Straits of Gibraltar. Right. So it depends on how big of a worldview you want to go. If you want to say the Pillars of Hercules are the islands at the end of Greece, that makes a lot of sense for a very Greek-centric world. If you want to say that the Straits of Gibraltar, they're a little more worldly. So, you take your pick.
Okay, then.
Atlantis has become kind of the modern language, common thing for island gone missing. It's on Atlantis.
I have a question. So,
yes.
If, with all this wanting to find out if there was an Atlantis and where it's at and all that kind of stuff, how would it benefit us if there was an Atlantis?
Because there's probably gold in them there hills.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. There's gold in them
That's what
hills.
People want. People are not looking for Atlantis now just to prove that it is. They're looking for Atlantis because they want the money that's involved in it. They want the stakers, the squatters' rights. They want to be able to say, that's my find.
Okay, so...
They want the speaking tour, the book engagement.
Okay, so this
Unless you're the
is
Nazis and then they want the Supermen.
right, and the super merman.
Yeah.
So basically, this is just like everything else. You want to be the first group, and they're investing
Exactly.
in this place. You want this and this and the
People are in this now at this point for the recognition and the money. They're not in this for
the passion of it.
Well, I mean, they might be passionate about it. So there are a lot of professional and amateur archaeologists that have gone looking for Atlantis. And I'm going to go through the hundreds of proposed locations. I'm not going through all hundreds, by the way. I did read through most of them.
Oh, wow. I thought
I picked out some of the good ones.
I thought this was going to be a 5-hour special.
Well, wait till you see what I cut out. No, I did actually read through. So there are hundreds. And you can go on the web and just search, Island of Atlantis, where is it kind of thing. You will hit thousands upon thousands of people with all the different theories. I took out the kind of super credible ones, and we're going to talk about those. So the first one is going to be the New World. So the pretty basic idea is that people were starting to explore the ocean. Somebody done got lost, landed in America, or the Americas, and then went back, and they couldn't find it again because they didn't know where they were going.
And it was Atlantis.
And so they slapped the name Atlantis on it. But actually, no. Francisco Lopez de Gamora wrote in 1552 that Columbus had really discovered the Atlantic island of Plato. In 1156, Augustine de Zarate,
oh, that's a good name too,
wrote that the New World had all the attributes of Atlantis as described by Plato. He also said that the people that Columbus found were all the lost people of Atlantis, and they were technologically behind, quotes around that. That's a quote from him, due to their separation from Europe. He also claimed that Plato mistranslated, and 9,000 years was really 9,000 months, or 750 years. So he got his math wrong, which is why people were looking in the wrong spot.
Okay.
Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa clarified in 1572 in the, quote, History of the Incas, that's a book, by the way, that Atlantis would stretch to include the land from the mouth of the Maranon, which is the Amazon River, and Brazil, all the way to the South Sea. He said that the sunken part was a landmass that the original people came to populate as Peru.
We went to several different places there.
We did I did kind of squished it all together, but the New World was actually labeled as the Isla Atlanticus in the 15th and 1600s. So that was a very popular theory for a long time, was that this new world that was discovered by Columbus and then, other people, and supposedly the Vikings were there first. That was the island of Atlantis. So it didn't sink. We just kind of forgot it was out there. We just kind of forgot it was there. So it didn't really sink so much as, But there are actually, honestly, if you go back and look, and then, like I said, I only picked out like some of the bigger locations to talk about today. But if you go back and look at like the island of Atlantis in the New World, there are actually people that have said the island of Atlantis was in the Gulf of Mexico, which is why the Gulf is kind of that round shape, because that's where it sunk.
Okay.
And that's why there's a bunch of little islands, because those are the tops of the mountains.
Gotcha.
Popping up. There are some people that said that, it's, it was kind of off the side of Brazil, which is why Brazil has that kind of odd cutout, but then the odd cutout of Brazil lines up with Africa, so that doesn't really work either. So there's a whole bunch of theories as to why the New World. And then there's actually a lake in Peru that has a sunken city in it. Now, they know when and how this city sunk. It's a relatively modern city. Not modern, but like within the last 500 years, kind of modern.
Right.
It's not no ancient Athens kind of thing.
Right.
But every time that comes up, people are like, oh, it's the Lost Island of Atlantis. Like, no. No,
that's not what it is.
It's an Incan town that sunk because it was built on a bog. And, bogs get squishy and then they sink.
I just think there's just be so many different places for this, and you can't dredge the ocean,
Well, with all the new radar technology, if it was out there, I'm sure we will find it. I don't think it's out there, but that's just me. So another suggestion would be Antarctica.
Okay.
So in the Peary Reis map from 1512 showed Antarctica as ice-free, which led many people to believe that this was the island of Atlantis. In the Atlantis blueprint, printed in 2002, Colin Wilson theorized that the Atlantis was found on, quote, Lesser Antarctica by the Ross Ice Shelf, and due to the Earth's crust displacement, which says that the Earth's outer crust is able to move away on the upper mantle rapidly up to 2,000 miles. So the island didn't really sink so much as float away. At least according to his theory.
I kind of like that theory that there's just an island out there floating around.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. It'd be like, hey, we're lost. We've been floating for centuries.
I'm very sorry, but our island got disconnected. Can you plug us back in?
Oh my god!
Like you never see somebody like floating on a lake where their boat kind of like ran out of gas or something happened. For some reason their engine's not turning over, and they're just kind of floating there, like, dopey dope. Can you tie me back in?
Yeah, that's what it's saying.
Like I can just imagine this little island floating past like Brazil, going like, "Hey, throw me a rope."
Hey, can you help us?
They get out to Mexico. Hey, Mayans.
Oh my god.
We'll give you advanced technology if you pull us in.
Oh my gosh, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
So just to prove this point, there have actually been archaeological digs in Africa, in Antarctica.
Oh,
and they haven't found squat.
Okay, well that makes sense.
They done found nothing.
They found a bunch of ice.
Well, let me rephrase that. The article that I found said, no one has found remnants of a higher civilization.
Oh.
Which means they have found, like...
Jack squat.
Well, no, I mean, they probably found a lot of, like, trade vessels and things like that from, like, people that have just gotten stuck there and died or whatever, or, very basic, like, whaling ships that would set up, like, very simple camps and things like that. But no higher civilizations like Atlantis supposedly had with, their sprawling city and their concentric rings and all that stuff. So this actually, the next one on the list is the one that you were talking about earlier, which we actually had that guest on, and I cannot remember what his name was.
I can't either. I come across it. Oh my gosh. Let me try this again. I come across his information every once in a while, and I'm like, oh my god, that guy was so interesting. He had so much going on. He had so much knowledge about, what was it? The Garden of Eden. It was the Garden of Eden we were talking about the one time, and it was like, stuff that we couldn't even poke a hole in it because we're like, I think our jaws were on the floor, like, holy crap. Like, it matched up and all this stuff. So that's why I'm curious to see how Atlantis measures up.
All right. So, we're talking about West Africa. So the Rishat structure in Mauritania lies on the Odane. I'll probably just butcher that one. Lies near Odane, which is a former Portuguese trading post. The structure generally is considered to be deeply eroded domal structure that overlies a still buried alkaline igneous intrusion. Basically means a big hole in the ground. There are a number of prehistoric and Neolithic tools and artifacts found along the edges of the structure, but nothing man-made has really been found within that structure itself. A number of the features of the structure match the description of Atlantis in Plato's reporting of Solon's account of Atlantis. So they include the structure's concentric circles, the diameter of the city matching that of the structure, a waterway outlet on the south side of the city, the salt water beneath the ground, everywhere except in the center of the structure, and the mountains sheltering the city to the north. The city's inland location was explained by lower sea levels at the time of the Younger Dryas impact, which is the lakes and rivers present in the Sahara at the time, and its present elevation by a gradual rise of the land, approximately an inch a year. So basically what they're saying is that it looks a heck of a lot like the description of Atlantis that was provided. The reason it's inland now is because the oceans are changing. And because the land is rising up a little bit, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is true. There used to be, rivers in the Sahara Desert. There used to be rivers in the, Nile River Valley, obviously, So things change all the time. So it's not entirely implausible that at one point there was a town that was on the water that is now in the middle of the desert.
Sorry. Town that was on water that's now in the middle of the desert.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump through some of these other ones because we're running short on time.
What?
I know, right? So the island of Pharos, in a book called In the Greek Myths by Robert Graves, published in 1955, they made the claim that this island was Atlantis. But there's not a lot of evidence to back that up. I felt that sentence was important to write down because the island of Pharos kept coming up over and over and over again as suggested place for Atlantis, but nobody can provide any actual, evidence other than because I said so. So I just want to put that out there that
that would be quite funny if that was actually it. Hundreds of years from now, they'd be like, that's it! We found it! Sorry.
So I just want to say that Robert Graves put that out there in 1955, the island of Pharos. He officially wrote that down. But yeah, no.
It's just like your mom said, because I said so.
You will obey me because I said so.
Right.
So modern Santorini's the other one, which is also known as Knossos and Thera.
That's a good name too.
Yes. So in 1900, Sir Arthur Evans discovered.
That was an easy name.
I can't say the name Arthur for some reason. I never can.
Arthur. Okay.
Arthur. It's that TH in the middle gets me every time.
Gotcha.
Anyway, he discovered proof of Minoans at Knossos, which linked the disappearance of the Minoan Empire with the historical destruction of Atlantis. Minoa was a dominant sea power until about 1400 BC, when some event changed society abruptly, and a huge empire became a collective of small villages. So the Minoans were this giant empire. Something bad happened, and all of a sudden they went from this huge empire of like massive city structures and governments to
tiny
a bunch of like little desperate villages all over the place.
Wow.
And it's an undefined event that happened, but everything's listed as an event. The Minoans had advanced engineering knowledge that allowed them to build 3- and 4-story buildings with indoor plumbing, advanced airflow. They had air conditioning.
Hey.
And they had earthquake-resistant buildings. These techniques were advanced way past what the mainland architects were doing at the time. There's also a caldera on Thera, which most likely erupted before the invention of writing in 1000 BC. The eruption was probably 1600 BC, and it was one of the most powerful eruptions occurring in the history of civilization. Volcanic events of this magnitude are known to generate tsunamis, and archaeological evidence suggests that such a tsunami may have devastated the Minoan fleet and coastal settlements on Crete. Such an event would have been noted as far away as Egypt as a period of darkness. Egypt could have told Solon about such an event. Plato did not describe a volcanic eruption, although the events he described as, quote, sunk by an earthquake or, quote, violent earthquakes and or a flood could perhaps be consistent with such this kind of eruption and resulting tsunami. And also, I mean, you have to understand, these people are in Egypt. Egypt is not right next door to Greece. It's a little bit far away across the sea. Mm-hmm. They might not have known about the earthquake. They might have not only known about the tsunamis and they might not have known about the volcano. They might have only felt the earthquakes and the tsunami.
Right.
So it's entirely plausible. Gold was also found near the pumice layer at Thera, which would have been trade goods, because gold is not native to that island. Plato described quarries on Atlantis as, quote, one kind of stone was white, another black, and a third red, which is actually a common variation of volcanic rock. That volcanic rock actually has white, gold, or white, black, and red. Yeah. The center of the metropolis of Atlantis was described as being laid out in a circular manner, surrounded by 3 concentric pits of seawater, 2 earth rings connected by the sea by a deep canal. Docks for the larger ships with a causeway were also mentioned. Scientists have reconfigured the shape of the island prior to the eruption and have concluded that there was a ring configuration on the island, with only one narrow entrance to a large lagoon with islands inside, much as Plato had described. Mm-hmm. One fresco in the ruins of Akrotiri is believed to be the landscape of the city before the destruction. It shows a large city on an island in the center of a caldera lagoon. So, I mean, it all matches pretty cleanly. So, whether or not that was actually Atlantis or just his, like, description of Atlantis, you know what I mean? Like, that was his influence. That's plausible. For me, that one rings probably the most true out of all of them. So, some other choices are the Cyprus Basin. Robert Sarmas, an American architect, says that Atlantis lies at the bottom of the Cyprus Basin near the eastern Mediterranean. He claims that sonar scans of the area reveal a number of features that look like man-made structures about 1,500 meters. Many marine archaeologists disagree with this speculation, though, and they say they've dived the area and everything kind of appears natural. So he gets a half point for trying.
He gets a more point than that guy says, because I said so.
Yes, because I said so, man gets no point. Haliki, which is the Greek city sunk by a tsunami in 373 BC, was actually around during Plato's lifetime. Many scholars have speculated that this is the inspiration for the story of Atlantis, and that definitely makes Atlantis fictional because Haliki was not, the same level that Atlantis would have been.
Right.
Modern studies of the area have attributed the catastrophe to an earthquake, followed by a tsunami, which destroyed and then submerged the city. It was rediscovered in 1988 by Greek archaeologist Dora.
Okay, don't even bother.
Katsanopoulou.
Oh, she did it?
Yeah. I apologize, Dr. Katsanopoulou, for just butchering your name. Other people have said that it possibly is in the Black Sea. So German researchers Siegfried and Christian Schopp say that before 5500 BC, a great plain lay to the northwest at a former freshwater lake. They claim that the Pillars of Hercules are actually the Straits of Bosporus.
Oh, that's a cool name.
However, the strait is 350 feet below global sea level, so they might not be able to provide a good theory on how ships from around the world could access the port safely. So they would have had to drop 350 feet to get into the port.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily make sense. There are no elevators for boats. In 2000, The Guardian reported that Robert Ballard, who, if you're familiar with that name, he discovered the Titanic and a lot of other deep sea finds, went down in a small submarine and found the remains of human habitation around 300 feet underwater in the Black Sea off the coast of Turkey. The area flooded around 5000 BC. An earthquake caused a fracture, which allowed the Caspian Sea to flood across the fertile plains of Atlantis. Simultaneously, the earthquake caused the vast farmlands of Atlantis to sink, forming the present-day Sea of Azov, the shallowest sea in the world.
Don't you think if there was something under the sea for so long that saw all these...
Don't sing. I know you're thinking...
What?
Don't sing.
I'm not going to sing. That all these tsunamis that we've had... and earthquakes under the, undersea and underwater and all this would bring some of that stuff up?
It would take a lot of effort to bring a building to this.
Well, I mean, I'm talking like remnants of this kind of stuff.
Well, people find, skeleton feet on the beaches all the time. Maybe that is Atlantis coming up.
Okay.
You don't know.
I don't know. That's
maybe they had Nikes, and those little feet in Nike that are washing up on the beaches all the time are actually part of Atlantis.
You never know.
They might be.
But just thinking that if the tsunami hits in the right place,
exactly,
something might show up on the beach, and you'd be like Atlantis, and that's what you'd think. I don't know.
A map just washes up.
It'd be a sign for the amusement park that says Atlantis, and then people would be
Atlantis land.
It'd be like Atlantis, like the land part would be cut off. Oh, wait, this is the plot for my show. I should shut up.
Okay,
sorry.
So the next one, actually, for me, was another one that kind of jumped out as something that might possibly be feasible. And it's called Tartessos, or Tartessos.
Tartessos. I think Tartessos would be like Mexican.
Well, that's actually Greek. It's a Spanish city. So it's a harbor city and the surrounding culture on the south coast of the Iberian Peninsula in modern Andalusia, Spain.
Andalusia?
Yeah. That's where the horsies are from.
Don't we have an Andalusia around here?
No.
We don't?
No.
I could have sworn we did. Okay.
There's a horse around here. We know Andalusia.
No, I thought we had a city called Andalusia in
If we do, I've never been there.
Oh, I'll have to look it up. Sorry,
it's
people.
Possible. It's at the mouth of the Guadalquivir River. The city itself starts appearing in historical records in the first millennium BC as, quote, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. So that seems pretty convenient.
There you go.
That they use that descriptor. The area is very mineral heavy, especially in tin and copper, and it had a great farmland. It was recorded as an excellent market city. Tartessos was a popular trade destination of the Phoenicians. According to Pausanias in the 2nd century AD, and it's Tartessus, and it's either spelled Tartessus or OS, depending on what source I could find. So bear with me here at that one. It's a river in the land of the Iberians running down into the sea by 2 mouths, and between those 2 mouths lies a city of the same name. The river, which is the largest in Iberia and tidal, those of the later day called Bastus, and some who think that Tarsus was the ancient capital of Carpia, a city beyond the Iberians. So modern scholars have tracked down these clues and said that the actual location of the city is probably buried in the shifting delta sandbar at the mouth of the river. In September of 1958, J.M. Luzon was the first to identify Tartessos in that area of modern Huelva. There was a huge gold discovery in the area at the time, which proved the ancients of the area were trading and had artistic influences from all around the Mediterranean. So that to me strikes me as like a pretty big clue, is that the city itself was a huge trade port. They were getting influences from all over the place. People were coming and going there.
Right.
But at the same time, Spain's at the bottom end of the Mediterranean boat before you kind of round the corner. So I could also see how that would be a big marketplace no matter whether you were, whether you were Atlantis or not.
Right, exactly.
But the idea that it's on the shifting delta and it sunk that way rather than, an entire island just dropped into the ocean.
Island just disappeared.
Yeah. That to me seems a little more feasible, is that the town just kind of shifted and got buried. So there are actually archaeological digs in that area now that are finding a considerable number of things. Nothing so far has said Atlantis land, but at least there's something going on there. So Spartel Bank, or Spartel Bank, sounds like a really bad banking institution, but it's not.
I was just going to say
it's actually a submerged island. It's right by the Straits of Gibraltar, and the highest point is currently 56 meters below the water surface. So it's fairly close to the surface. It's thought that the island sank as part of a natural land erosion and landslides. Geological evidence claims that it vanished under the surface about 10,000 BC due to rising ocean levels. It was proposed by Jacques Collina-Girard and Marc-André Guster. I feel like that was a French guy with a German last name. At the site of Atlantis, however, that the island sank long before the Bronze Age and most likely could not have supported a civilization the size of what Plato described as Atlantis. So the island itself is actually fairly tiny. It's just fairly close to the surface, and it did actually sink. So sinking islands are plausible.
It happens.
Just not really big ones the size of Iceland.
Just really tiny ones.
So those are some of the big ones that I pulled out. Some of the other options that I found that I thought were kind of funny was the Irish Sea. Apparently Atlantis is in the Irish Sea. I don't know about that one. The island of Ireland.
Oh, the island of Ireland is Atlantis?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Denmark.
No.
I'm pretty sure Denmark's still there, though. It's still attached to the mainland. I'm not sure. Finland.
No.
Sweden.
No, it's still there.
Britain. Well, the island of Britain matches very similarly the actual physical descriptions, but there's no concentric circle, town. There's no, and it didn't sink. It's still there.
Still there.
As far as I know.
Unless it just floated away.
As I was there yesterday. It might have moved. Maybe that's what it was, attached to Antarctica, and it floated all the way up. It flew by the Brazilians. They couldn't catch it, so it tried to catch the Aztecs and the Mayans, and they failed miserably. So it, ricocheted off of the New World and bounced over there, and now it's there.
Now it's just stuck there.
Yeah, it's just stuck where it is.
That's it. Atlantis is Britain.
Yeah. Done. I got the best story ever. So some of the other options are the Azores, which I could see an island in the Azores disappearing. But I also don't see no 350-mile wide island in the Azores. The Canary Islands, same thing. There's some pretty big islands there. I don't know if I'd do that. And then mainland Greece itself. That it was attached to mainland Greece and it just sank off of mainland Greece. But that defeats the purpose of it being an island.
Right.
Like if it's an island, it's an island.
It's an island, yeah.
So, final thoughts?
All I could think of is Atlantis land. Well, my first
coming
thought,
soon to the Parax theme park.
The first thing that comes to mind is
Atlantis land.
No, not Atlantis land, but like what would we gain from knowing if there was an Atlantis? First of all,
money.
That was the first
fame,
thought that came through.
Power,
and then
money.
I think it's
relics, mostly money.
But I think there's also the thought in my head that there's just some things that we're not meant to know, and one day it could be millions of years from now. There's going to be something that comes up, and it's going to be, one of those concentric
rings is going to rise out of the ocean.
It's going to come out of the ocean. And
ladies and gentlemen, now presenting in the center ring, Atlantis.
Oh my God.
Ta-da! I have arrived.
I will be selling tickets.
What do you think it's just going to rise out of?
No, I'm just saying that something, like how, I remember when the tsunami hit the coast of Japan, and they were showing all these pictures of all these fish that were coming up that you never see. And it just, to me, it seems like something's just going to happen that's going to either destroy any myth or it's going to support any.
Honestly, I don't think the myth's ever going to be destroyed. I feel like at this point, we haven't found any proof of anything. So I don't necessarily know that something's going to happen that's going to totally unless you can find a piece of paper from Plato going, I made this up.
True.
That's the only thing that probably will stop people. Even then, people will be like, oh, it's forged or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like the myth of Atlantis is never going to die necessarily, but if something is going to happen, you're right. It's going to be something big, catastrophic, that's going to shift the sand somewhere.
Right.
And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's going to be this, huge monolithic structure that's going to be found, and then they're going to start digging and they'll find it and they'll call it Atlantis.
Right.
Whether or not it actually is Atlantis, that'll be a whole different conversation.
Right. Well, they'll have to explore that, but I think it's just there's so much. I mean, but there's so much detail and so much history to it. I mean,
but there's not that much detail.
Well, I mean,
we read all the details there were.
I'm just saying that. I mean, for me, that's a lot of I was talking about like detail of the island, like what kind of people were on it, and all that
stuff,
all that. It was great stuff because you were saying this and I'd be like, I'd live there, and I just think, as long as we have theories, conspiracies, all these things are just going to keep kept alive
and they'll keep our show going for years and years.
That's right. I mean,
or you can just go to a Futurama where they sunk the island of Atlanta.
Oh my God. I think I'll just watch Futurama.
Exactly. Everyone wants to go to the Lost Island of Atlanta.
I love it.
With their Coca-Cola bottling plant. Have you seen that? Here's all the great things in Atlanta. There's the baseball stadium, the Delta Hub, the Coca-Cola bottling plant, Delta Hub, Coca-Cola bottling plant. Like, that was like
oh gosh, I love that show. I have to start watching it again.
Yeah, I know I want to sing, but I can't sing because that's not right.
Yes.
But all right, we are out of time. So, last one, true or false? Atlantis is a thing. I was about to say, is Atlanta a thing?
I would like to believe that there was such a place as Atlantis. Yes. All
right, so the island of Atlantis is true. I don't think it was, but sure.
And let's put it this way. I think it would be nice that there would be a place like that.
I would love to believe that it was. I think Plato made it up. I think it was a story. I think he heard about an island sinking and he decided to grab it and run with it.
Right. If he was a storyteller, he was going to.
He done made a good story.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's going to be passed out, like we talk about legends, going to be passed down from generation to generation and just keep going and keep going.
All right. Well, it's all you people digging out there in the dirt looking for the island of Atlantis. You're digging in the wrong spot. It's underwater. All right. So, as always, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Cara.
We're going to return her to the aliens now. We'll see you guys in the shadows.
Bye.